Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm the last but one presenter. I'm sure you could be tired, but don't fall asleep. If you start seeing me getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and I disappear, it is not me who has disappeared. You are sleeping. Okay. All right. As it has already been said, I work for the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization as training officer. I like Zimbabwe. It's my second home. I've been here for about nine years now, and I'm sure I deserve to be given citizenship and a family. All right. I will speak on intellectual property and wealth creation. That's the presentation outline. I'll just give you a brief about us as a RIPO and our mission. And then, because the topic is intellectual property and wealth creation, some may be asking, what is this intellectual property? I just want to give a brief about intellectual property. And then I'll talk about IP protection as key to wealth creation, the benefits of IP protection, and then the strategies that we can use through technology transfer and commercialization of IP to create wealth. And then I'll talk about what initiatives as a RIPO we have undertaken to promote IP awareness and wealth creation. And then there's a proposed way forward. RIPO stands for the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization. It's an intergovernmental organization. It was established in 1976, on 9 December in Lusaka, Zambia. But the headquarters is now here in Harare at 11 Natal Road in Belgravia. The membership of the organization is open to all member states of the African Union, or the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Those are the member states of the organization. Currently, we have 19 member states. 19 member states. So you see where the southern part has 8 member states, Eastern Africa has 6 member states, and then Western Africa has 5 member states. What was the purpose for which RIPO was established, and what were the specific objectives? RIPO was mainly established to pool the resources of the member states together. That's why it was established. It was aimed at, it was to avoid duplication of resources and financial and human resources, so that if resources are put together, they can be used for the benefits of the different member states of the organization. So specific objectives for which we were established to develop and harmonize IP laws and policies that are appropriate to the member states of the organization to meeting their needs. Also, we organize conferences, seminars, and other meetings on intellectual property. We register and administer IP rights. We promote the exchange of ideas and experience, research and studies relating to intellectual property matters. We promote capacity building and development of human resources in intellectual property. And we also promote dissemination of technological information and transfer of technology, as well as develop copyright systems for the economic benefits of the member states. Now, this animal called intellectual property, just a definition. When we talk of intellectual property, mainly we talk of creations that result from intellectual activity. It could be in the industrial, scientific, literary, or artistic fields. So in summary, we just say intellectual property refers to the creations of the mind. If you come up with an invention, that is intellectual property. Okay? So it's the creations of the mind. It includes inventions, literary and artistic works, and symbols, names, and images that are used in commerce. Two main branches of our intellectual property. We have industrial property, and that includes patents for inventions, trademarks, industrial designs, and geographical indications of source. The second main branch is copyright and related rights. And when we talk of copyright, it covers literary works such as novels, poems, and plays, films, music, artistic works, for example, drawings, paintings, photographs, and sculptures, and also architectural designs. And we have rights which are related to copyright. Sometimes we call them neighboring rights to copyright. These include the rights of performers, producers of phonograms, and broadcasting organizations. So when we talk of copyright, basically we are talking of a bundle of rights which allows the owner exclusive rights to. So it's all these rights you see around here concerning copyright. You have rights to copy or reproduce, then you have to publish, those are your rights. Those are what we call exclusive rights. You have rights to perform in public, communicate your work, make an adaptation, rent articles, it could be CDs, to prevent importation of infringing works. You have the right to sell or license your rights. So that's about copyright in summary. I was just trying to describe what intellectual property is all about. But now, the topic we are talking about today is IP. Where you see IP, that's intellectual property. IP is intellectual property. We are talking about intellectual property and wealth creation. So, when you have created your intellectual property, it is key that you seek protection. That's very, very important. Once you have created your intellectual property, for example, new technologies, the next step you should think about is the protection, so that you have your exclusive rights. Before you think of commercializing, because sometimes we rush into thinking of making money before you even protect. And that's where we miss it, because if we don't protect, anyone can exploit our invention without our permission. And if we invested a lot in research to come up with the invention, we may not recoup from our invention. So protection is very, very important. And protecting IP also protects the investment you made in research and development. And it ensures that research discoveries have the opportunity to reach the stream of commerce. Sorry, before I move away from this slide. Now, once you have protected your IP, intellectual property, you now can think of strategies for technology transfer and commercialization. That's how you can make money. Mari, Nishona. All right. Now, why is it important to protect your intellectual property? Why is it important? It is important because IP protection provides exclusive rights. When we say exclusive rights, we mean the rights that you are given to exclude others from exploiting your invention, be it selling, making, distributing, or even exporting without your permission. So you have the rights to exclude others. That's why we call them exclusive rights. So it gives you that exclusive right. That also gives you the opportunity to also jump up and down to make money. Okay? Another benefit of IP protection, IP rights, the rights holder, when you have registered your intellectual property, you have been given your IP rights. You have your IP rights because of registration. Or you have, for example, you have been granted a patent. You are the IP rights holder. And you therefore may give permission to or to license other parties to exercise your rights on mutually agreed terms. Where we talk of licensing, obviously you give permission to others in exchange for royalties, for example. Okay, so you get money. It is also important to protect IP because you may sell your IP rights. You may sell your IP rights to someone else, and when you have sold, it means you cease to be the owner of the IP rights. The one who has bought the IP rights is now the new owner and can exercise the rights that you used to exercise. Now, in case of infringement, when you have protected your IP and you are given a certificate for registration, for example, you can use that to defend your rights in course of law. That's the one importance of or benefit of IP protection. Or you can initiate legal proceedings against any infringers because you are protected. You are legally exercising your rights. Now, this one. IP protection prevents inventions that require high development costs from being copied by competitors at no cost. You sit down in your lab, you work long hours to come up with an invention and you don't protect it. Someone can just copy that without even investing anything in research, you see. So protection is very, very important. And if it were not for protection, who would be willing to invest more into research? No one, because they would not be able to recoup from their investment. So protection is very, very important. Now let's talk about strategies for creating wealth through technology transfer and commercialization of intellectual property. These are some of the strategies. Your licensing, you can use licensing, you can use own exploitation, you can sell your IP rights, you can create spin-off companies, startup companies, you can do joint venture or merger and acquisition. So I want to finish off this discussion on strategy by just giving a brief descriptions of each of these. Licensing. You as the IP rights holder, you can give another entity the authority to commercially exploit the IP assets, and in return, you receive royalties. To make that decision to license out, sometimes it is because you as the IP rights holder, you do not have the financial resources for self-exploitation of the IP asset. You know, people come up with inventions and they know that they don't have money to commercialize the IP asset. And they just keep it to themselves. License others so that those who have the financial muscle to do it so that you can also get royalties. You can also license others when you don't have the business skill. License others, you get royalties, and maybe sometimes you may not have enough time for self-exploitation of the IP asset. You license others, then in return you get royalties. Another way is to do own exploitation of the IP asset. That is to say, for example, you have come up with an invention. By the way, when I say invention, I'm referring to what you have created to solve a certain technical problem. Because you cannot sit down to invent something that is useless. You need to create something that is solving a certain problem for the society. Okay? Now, when you have come up with an invention of that nature, and you know you have the financial muscle to take that to the market, that's where now we talk of own exploitation. You can manufacture, sell, export, distribute, whatever. You can do that, okay? So in that case, you have the necessary resources. There is a reasonable market for the product. on the expected royalty from licensing of the IP could be low. So you do not opt for licensing because the expected royalty from the licensing would be small. So instead, you would go for own exploitation. Another strategy is to sell your IP rights. So you sell your IP rights and you cease to be the owner of the IP rights. So the one who buys is now the new rights holder and can commercially exploit the IP asset. And this mainly occurs when the IP rights holder is unable to exploit it by itself due to lack of financial resources, lack of business skill, lack of time, or sometimes you just desire to get profit at minimum risk. So you can just sell, okay? And then joint venture is another option that you can also make wealth from your intellectual property. You can invite an investor to jointly exploit the IP asset with you. So the IP asset needs to be valued and converted into equity. Valuation of IP asset is very, very important because when you are going into a joint venture, you have to know what you are bringing into the business from your side. So it's very, very important. And in this case, the investor brings the financial resources, which you may not have, and you bring in the technology and the know-how, and you work together to make money. Mergers and acquisitions are also some ways, strategies of commercialization and technology transfer, which result also in creation of wealth. This is very important. Valuation of IP is very, very important also when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. If a merger is to take place, you need to know what you are bringing into the business. If another company is acquiring another company, they also need to know what they are acquiring, how much value they are acquiring. So it's very, very important. You can create spin-off companies. You can also create startup companies. Those are just some of the strategies that can be used to create wealth through technology transfer and commercialization. Now, as a RIPO, African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, we also have undertaken some initiatives to promote IP awareness. We realize that on the African continent, we also need to build capacity in the field of intellectual property. And for that reason, in 2008, we partnered with the World Intellectual Property Organization and Africa University here in Mutare, Zimbabwe, to offer a master's program in intellectual property. So the program has been running. We are in the 12th year. So far we have graduated 324 students from the university. That was in 2008 when this program started. Just last year, in August, we partnered with Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana, Aripo at the university, to offer an MPhil in IP. So the first cohort just finished their coursework. They are now going to do their research work for their dissertations. And this coming August, we are also launching another master's degree program in partnership with the University of Dar es Salaam in the United Republic of Tanzania to also do the master's program with them. So we have these programs just to build capacity for the African continent. It's not only that, as a RIPO, we also do short courses. Sometimes we get invitations to do tailor-made courses to meet the specific needs of an institution. That we also do. To also promote IP awareness and wealth creation, we also focus on academic and research institutions. From 2017, we have been focusing on academic and research institutions doing roving seminars in our member states. That's to bring about awareness so that the institutions can use the IP system to create wealth. To bring about awareness, we also partnered with Africa University and we launched it in December 2016, on 9 December, when we were celebrating or commemorating our 40 years of existence, we launched the African Journal of Intellectual Property so that we can disseminate information and knowledge that is created from research. So anyone can submit an article for publication in this IGP. And we have also realized that many institutions do not have intellectual property policies. Some do have, but they have not been operationalized. Some IP policies are in draft form and they are still on the shelf. So we realized that there is a need to provide guidelines for development of institutional intellectual property policies. So we have developed the IP policy development guidelines, specifically targeting universities and research institutions in Africa. So we have them. We can share such guidelines so that institutions can develop their IP policies. The way forward. You know, when you talk of commercialization or making money, making wealth, we need to commercialize what is very important to people, what they think is, it meets their needs. So we are encouraging that academic and research institutions should collaborate with the industry so that they remain relevant in responding to the needs of the industry. So our policies and practices in our academic and research institutions should adequately encourage collaboration with industry so that industry is fully aware of new innovations emerging from our institutions. You come up with an invention, you remain quiet, you don't collaborate with the industry, no one knows what you have. How do you commercialize? How do you make money out of that? Use of the IP system to protect the IP access. It is very important to use the IP system. You know, the success of academic and research institutions can be measured by the number of IP assets you have generated, number of IP applications or filings you have, number of IP assets you have licensed out so that you are getting royalties, amount of income from technology licensing, how much have you accumulated from the licensing of the technology that you have developed, and now how many jobs have you created. These are just among the many ways you can evaluate the success of an academic and research institution. We also sometimes see, you know, in universities and institutions, for you to be promoted, you have to publish a lot. That's very good. But you also think of protecting before you publish. Maybe Prof, the institutions, Honorable Minister, the institutions, the promotions should also take into consideration the number of patents that the individual has helped the institution to be granted.
They do.
They do.
I signed on 27 July 2018. They do.
The minister, Honorable Minister remembers the date. So it's done. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you for that. Yeah, so it is very important to use the IP system to protect and commercialize our IP assets. Development of institutional IP policies for IP management. For us to manage what we have as IP, we need an IP policy to guide everything. Otherwise, in the absence of an IP policy, there can be confusion. Inventors or researchers need to know if this invention which I have worked on, the university or the research institute commercializes it, how much comes to me? The IP policy contains such things. You see, so it is very important for easy management of IP policy, IP in our institutions. The IP policy is very critical. At governments, we also encourage governments to commit adequate resources for research and development. academic institutions to promote IP awareness through incorporation of IP in the curriculum. Honorable Minister, that's also one thing that we are promoting, that we need to catch the muyani. If we introduce intellectual property as one of the courses, one of the core courses in our institutions, such that everyone who comes to the university, by the time they leave the university, they should know about IP. It's very, very important, because we are now struggling to bring about awareness, but when we bring it into the curriculum, everyone who goes through our systems will know what IP is all about, and they should be able to know how to protect intellectual property and what are the benefits of IP protection. And businesses and institutions to take stock of what IP they have and leverage on for competitive advantage and wealth creation. As an institution, we need to take stock of what intellectual property assets we have. Are we using those intellectual property assets? Have they been registered? Or is someone infringing on our rights? So that we can leverage on them for competitive advantage and wealth creation. Tatenda. Thank you, Honorable Minister.